Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
House Republicans approved a bill for the Keystone XL Pipeline hours after the Nebraska Supreme Court tossed a lawsuit that would have blocked its construction. The House voted 266 to 153 in favor of the bill speeding up the construction of the controversial pipeline. That's despite a veto threat President Obama made earlier. White House spokesman Eric Schultz released a statement saying the administration plans to let the Keystone XL process play out in Congress, but that a veto is still guaranteed from the president. But Alaska Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who chairs the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, said regardless of whatever new excuse he may come up with, Congress is moving forward. The new Republican-controlled Senate will vote on similar legislation in the coming weeks. For Newsy, I'm Christina Hartman.
So I think the Keystone Pipeline would not be the answer to our labor market problems, but I think it's beneficial. I mean, the way I would look at it, it's a $7 billion infrastructure project without any taxpayer money being used to finance it. So in that sense, it's quite a good infrastructure project, and does seem to be a market demand for pipeline infrastructure. So there'd be enormous benefits, not just in job creation. I think Transamerica, the company who's proposing it, suggesting it'll be about 20,000 jobs. And on top of that, you have state, local, and federal tax revenue that would increase as a result. But even more so, as I suggested, there's a market demand. If you're getting oil from the oil sands in Canada down to the Gulf Coast, it's going to drive down the price of oil in the Gulf Coast, less of reliance on importing oil, whether or not from the Middle East or Venezuela. So there is enormous welfare benefits both to U.S. refiners and to U.S. consumers of having that oil being transported down south. So I think it's on the economics of it, it's definitely a plus. There are environmental concerns. I don't think the environmental concerns are enough to justify opposition to it. The main environmental concern, I think, is that this oil is coming from oil sands, and that seemed to be a little dirtier from a greenhouse gas point of view than traditional or conventional oil. But if you look at kind of the life cycle of oil use, it's really not a substantial increase relative to conventional oil. And additionally, you have to ask what's going to happen if you don't do it. So as I just alluded to, if we're not getting that oil, we are going to be importing more oil from other countries. So it is a world market, so we're still going to be getting other oil. And Canadians, maybe they build a pipeline headed west and sell it to China. So there might be a marginal decrease in the amount of oil you see out there, but it's not really going to my mind, have a substantial environmental benefit. So on net, you can see what I'm doing. I'm working through a benefit cost analysis basically on the fly, and it looks like a pretty standard case where the benefits outweigh the costs.
Welcome. Ted Glick has devoted 46 years of his life to the progressive social change movement. For the last 10 years, he has played a national leadership role in the effort to stabilize the climate and for a clean energy revolution. In 2004, he co-founded the Climate Crisis Coalition, and in 2005 coordinated the USA Join the World effort leading up to the December 3rd actions during the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Montreal. In May of 2006, he became the national coordinator of the U.S. Climate Energy Council and is currently National Policy Director for the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Since the mid-70s, he has been actively involved in community organizing efforts around environmental, tenants' rights, community development, and racial justice issues in Brooklyn, New York, and northern New Jersey. He has been arrested numerous times for acts of nonviolent civil disobedience on climate issues. His prolific writing on the movement includes his 2000 book, Future Hope, A Winning Strategy for a Just Society, and his column, Future Hope, which has been distributed nationally since 2000. He joins us to discuss the latest developments regarding the controversial Keystone XL Pipeline legislation and project, and why it's something everyone in America should be deeply concerned about. It's a pleasure to welcome you back, Mr. Glick.
Thank you, Gary.
I'm going to open with a Fox News report that was published on January 11th of this year, and I'd like to get your response to several points that were made regarding the Senate vote. Hoven says Senate still needs 4 votes to pass veto-proof Keystone legislation, is the title of the article. The Senate still needs 4 votes to pass veto-proof legislation to build the Keystone XL oil pipeline, Senator John Hoven, who sponsored the legislation, said Sunday. Hoven, a Republican who represents North Dakota, told Fox News Sunday the GOP-controlled Senate remains shy of the 67 votes needed to override a presidential veto. All of the chamber's 54 Republicans and 9 Democrats are expected to support the legislation, which needs a 2/3 majority to override the veto. But we're going to the floor with an open amendment process, trying to foster more bipartisanship, Hoven said. He also suggested Senate Republicans might attach the bill to other legislation that would get 67 votes. The upper chamber could hold a preliminary vote on the legislation as early as Monday. The Obama administration early last week repeated that President Obama intends to veto the legislation should it reach his desk before a State Department study on the issue is completed. Hoven suggested that Obama has stalled the project since shortly after taking office in 2009 through repeated State Department studies. He's delayed this project for more than 6 years. America won World War II in less than 6 years, so clearly he's trying to defeat the project with endless delays, he told Fox. The GOP-led House last week passed legislation to build the pipeline. On January 12th, an update on the Senate vote was published on the Huffington Post website, a portion of which stated, "The Senate advanced legislation Monday night to approve the Keystone XL Pipeline, even though President Barack Obama has already said he would veto it. The Senate voted 63 to 32 to clear a procedural hurdle and begin debate on the bill. 10 Democrats and 1 independent, Angus King of Maine, voted with every Republican to move the bill forward. A final vote is expected later in the week." Despite the strong vote, the Senate lacks the 2/3 majority needed to overcome a veto. The House passed the bill last week by a vote of 266 to 153, also shy of the 290 votes needed to clear a veto. Now that Republicans have control of the House and Senate, how concerned are you that the pipeline project will be given a green light?
I think the odds are very good that after this passes the Senate, it has passed the House, of course, that's going to be vetoed by President Obama. He has said that's what he's going to do. So I think that the chances of this legislation going into effect are essentially zero. That's how I see it.
At this point, would you say many of your fellow activists remain hopeful, even though the GOP now controls both houses of Congress and might win the White House in 2016?
I think that a lot of climate activists, people working against the Keystone Pipeline, we certainly are not pleased about what has started to happen and will keep happening in Congress. It's very clear that a lot of bad legislation will be proposed, a lot of bad legislation will be passed. A lot of bad legislation will be vetoed, most likely some of it will get through some of the compromise process. That's definitely not what any of us would like, but the reality is that the real heart of the climate movement is much more among grassroots activists, among people working locally. For example, yesterday, there were demonstrations all around the country. I think about 175 demonstrations organized on 3 days' notice against the Keystone Pipeline and calling upon Obama to go ahead and finally just say no to this pipeline. That's what he needs to do. After he vetoes it, he should then issue his decision, which should be that this thing is a bad idea, a bad plan, bad for the climate, bad for the country, bad for people in the Midwest whose water supply is a danger of being poisoned by leaks from this pipeline if it's built. He should do that, but there's a lot of local action that is connected beyond just a local area. There's a very much connected climate movement that's hard at work, fighting fracking, fighting mountaintop removal, fighting this pipeline, fighting other pipelines. So I don't expect the reality of climate denier, essentially control of Congress, to have a major impact on the climate movement. Indeed, the reality is that in a lot of cases, when you look at protest movements historically, they often are much more visible, much more active, much more demonstrative in a situation like this, where the reins of power are in the hands of people who are very upfront and clear about their opposition to moving in the direction that we believe they need to move, which of course is away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy and energy efficiency, and serious concern for our very threatened ecosystem and our Earth and all its life forms.
Recently, acclaimed actor, director, and environmentalist Robert Redford also expressed his opposition to the pipeline in a Huffington Post article. Redford stated, "Our neighbors to the north know what's at risk. Oil companies are gunning for a U.S. port because Canadian citizens have refused to let more tar sands oil pipelines endanger their communities. Here is why Americans should not accept what Canadians have already rejected." And he goes on to make 4 very strong points, and feel free to add to them.
Okay.
The first of which is, it will provide just 35 permanent jobs. Pipeline backers misled the public with inflated job numbers. The truth is, according to the State Department, the pipeline will create 35 permanent jobs and 1,950 construction jobs for 2 years. We can create more and less dangerous jobs by investing in clean energy.
That's all true, based upon everything that I know and have read.
Second point, it threatens the American breadbasket. Keystone would run within a mile of more than 3,000 drinking and irrigation wells in 3 states. Major blowouts in Michigan and Arkansas confirmed that tar sands oil is harder to clean out of water, backyards, and neighborhoods than conventional crude.
That's absolutely true. It's also what goes through the tar sands pipelines. It's called a dilbit, I believe, once it's all put together. The tar sands oil is so gooey, that's why it's called tar sands. It's so gooey, it basically can't flow through a pipeline. So there's other chemicals, solutions that need to be added to it, and they're corrosive, which is why these pipelines tend to leak more often than other pipelines. So it's just a bad idea in terms of the potential impacts on water supply and people's lands in the areas where this pipeline will go through.
The third point that Mr. Redford makes is tar sands extraction devastates the environment. The process entails clear cutting, strip mining, and generating enormous amounts of waste. Toxins sit in open lagoons that leak nearly 3 million gallons into the watershed every day, contributing to elevated cancer risk among nearby First Nation villages.
That's really true. And the reality is also an important point to make is that in terms of the movement to stop this pipeline and the movement really against the extraction of this tar sands oil, that's ultimately what most of us active in this movement want. We need to leave that tar sands oil in the ground. Studies have shown by agencies like the International Energy Agency and I believe the World Bank that we need to leave at least 2/3, as some reports say it's more like 80% of all fossil fuels that are in the ground right now need to stay there if we're to have any chance of keeping emissions of greenhouse gases below the 2% threshold, 2% centigrade. That's 2% centigrade of pre-industrial revolution levels. So you don't make progress on dealing with the climate crisis by bringing out of the ground even dirtier sources of oil.
And the final point he makes is Canadian tar sands oil intensifies climate change. Tar sands oil is the most carbon-intensive fuel on the market. All told, the additional carbon pollution from this project would be as much as putting up 5.7 million additional cars on the road, the State Department analysis found.
Yep, that's true. I have seen some analyses that have indicated that the impacts on climate will be worse than this 5.7 million cars on the road, but that's enough. Just the wrong way to go.
Sunday Morning Futures, which airs on the Fox News network, recently showcased Republican Senator Jerry Moran, who represents the state of Kansas. And he said something that took the Keystone XL Pipeline debate to a whole new level by proclaiming, and I'm paraphrasing here, "The pipeline would allow us to forego foreign oil and prevent us from giving money to countries that use American dollars to fund terrorist organizations." Now, I suspect many in the country, no matter what political party they support, would say he has a point. Your response?
Actually, about 13 years ago, I was a candidate of the Green Party in New Jersey for the U.S. Senate in 2002. This was the year after the terrorist attacks on 9/11 in New York City and D.C. And one of my main points was that we need to get off of fossil fuels and get serious about the development, the deployment, the use of wind and solar and other renewable energy sources so that we were not dependent upon Middle East oil. So I get where the senator's coming from. But he just doesn't really take his argument to its logical conclusion, which is that instead of, we're still importing, I believe, 60% of all the oil that we use in the United States. I believe that's the figure. So we're still dependent upon other countries, and the Middle East is the place where a lot of the oil that still exists that's not in the United States, that's where we get it. So the logical conclusion of his argument is what I was campaigning on 13 years ago. Getting off fossil fuels, getting off of oil, getting off of coal, getting off of gas, and getting very serious about the renewable energy sources as well as energy efficiency measures and conservation that can get us not just energy independence, but get us to a point where we are not facing this very extreme climate emergency with extreme weather events already starting to happen that are going to only get worse unless we get serious about this climate crisis.
According to another online news report, which was published January 13th of this year, the Senate is expected to vote on whether or not climate change is real as part of the Keystone bill. A section of the report stated, the Senate agreed Tuesday to move to debate on amendments to legislation that would force approval of the Keystone XL Pipeline, another step towards the anticipated approval of the bill sometime next week. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said debate will be allowed on any amendment put forward, including one from the Democrats attempting to put Congress on the record acknowledging that fossil fuels are driving climate change. We're wide open, said McConnell at a press conference Tuesday afternoon. We're not trying to block anybody's amendments. What's your take on this bold move by the Senate?
We'll see how it actually happens, how it evolves. It's a good idea for there to be debate on the Senate floor over major issues like this. I think that's a good thing. Whether or not, again, the debate is as substantive and to the point as it really should be remains to be seen. But, the bottom line is that a lot of this is essentially really political theater. It's not it's really not about legislation so much. Everybody who's following this closely, including Mitch McConnell, knows that this legislation is not going to be signed into law by President Obama. He's made that very clear. This really amounts to political theater. That's what it's all about. But, political theater can be valuable. It can help to educate people. So I'm hoping that the debate is going to lead to a lot of people being educated, both on the issues generally. Maybe more and more people will see that an awful lot of the Republicans, unfortunately, in Congress, and this is distinct from rank-and-file Republicans. It's very different when you look at the polls in terms of what rank-and-file Republicans are thinking. But the vast majority of Republicans in the Senate and in the House are essentially climate deniers. They're really out of step with their base. You're always going to have some. It's true in the Democratic Party, too. You have climate deniers in the Democratic Party, but there's a lot fewer of them. The Republican Party in Congress, if they were truly representing where their base is on this issue, where the members of the Republican Party are, it should be more like maybe, 50-50 in terms of climate denier Republicans and then Republicans who acknowledge that the climate crisis is real and that we need to take action about it. If this debate somehow could move that needle forward, could get more Republicans to realize that they can't be climate deniers anymore and they have to address the issue and deal with it, that might be a positive thing that comes out of it. I hope that happens.
I've spoken to a number of people about this issue, and many of them don't see what the big deal is, don't understand it, or they simply view it as an issue that riles up a bunch of tree huggers, and that's a quote one of them used. What would you offer to those who say, it won't directly affect me or my family, so who cares?
It will affect some people directly, particularly the people in the path of the pipeline. They definitely will be very affected. And the people up there in Alberta province where the tar sands are being developed and exploited, they have been feeling this for many years, as was referred to earlier, Robert Redford's comments about it, and the impacts on local people, many of whom are indigenous people up there, the cancer rates, the poisoning of their water supply, etc. So there definitely are things happening that people who have a concern for other people and people who want other people to have similar chances that they had to live healthy lives, etc. We should be concerned about that. Everybody should be concerned about those things, those impacts that are already happening with the development of the tar sands itself. But in terms of the impact of the eventual decision that I do think Obama will make to turn this pipeline down, it will have some impacts in terms of the climate, as we've referred to. It will also make a very important statement about how we can't be about moving to dirtier sources of energy than the ones that we've been using for decades and decades, which that's what this is. These sources of energy are dirty. There's a great deal more greenhouse gases that are emitted through the whole process of producing and extracting this stuff. So it'll be an important statement that we can't keep getting the energy sources that are harder to reach, that take more greenhouse gases, et cetera. That'll be important. I think it will also be important in this year when at the end of the year in Paris, the nations of the world are on track more or less, to come up with some kind of a new international agreement on this issue. I mean, for Barack Obama, who is trying to be seen as a world leader on this issue, there's the agreement that his administration negotiated with China just last month to have China and the United States working together on some levels to be reducing emissions. It was important. And it was important leadership that was given, even if the actual specifics of what they decided upon are not real strong. They're moving in the right direction. So for President Obama to be doing that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, be approving this tar sands oil pipeline that's going to help the tar sands industry expend even more greenhouse gases, it doesn't make sense, and that would be a negative thing. So there are a lot of reasons why it's a very important decision that he's going to be making that will have a very real impact on the future of the ecosystem, the future of our environment. And that's very important for our children and our grandchildren, and probably for us in our lifetime, as we see these extreme weather events already starting to happen because of changes taking place to our atmosphere and our climate.
Will you be organizing or taking part in protests against the proposed construction in the coming months?
Yeah, I will be. I was part of a demonstration just last night in my town, actually, Bloomfield, New Jersey, where I live. There were about 50 of us who had a nice, strong demonstration in the cold weather, and a lot of others that took place around the country, and I am connected in very much to the groups that are leading this effort, and I will be involved with it for sure, as will the groups that I work with.
And is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
I would just want to underline again, we are at a really critical point. I mean, 2015 as a year is a very important year in terms of the direction of our energy policy. There are some good things that are happening in terms of a shift away from our dependence, our addiction to fossil fuels. Renewable energy is growing very quickly, particularly wind and solar. Prices have come down. It's much more affordable. It's much more popular. And because that's happening, that in the long term is a threat. It's seen, unfortunately, but understandably, as a threat by the oil and gas and the coal industry. They're going to be doing everything they can, particularly with this Congress that is so influenced by the fossil fuel industry. They're going to be doing everything they can to try to slow down that transition that's happening, to try to obstruct it, and we will be there to fight that. And as we fight it, I expect that the American people will increasingly be seen as supportive of what we're doing, and really having a lot of problems with what climate deniers in Congress are doing, again, from both parties. because the future clearly in the 21st century is not in the dirty energy sources of the 20th century. It's in wind and solar and energy from the waves and the currents and energy from the earth through geothermal and the clean and renewable energy sources that could lead to a very different future than the one we're facing right now.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Glick. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Gary.
And I thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you'd like to submit a request to be on the show, or to submit a private comment about a particular episode, you may do so at fromthegman@gmail.com. fromthegman@gmail.com. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.